Welcome everybody to this webinar. Thanks everybody for joining us on this Friday lunchtime. My name is Katja Behrendt and I'm the convener of the Q Community Special Interest Group on Mindfulness for Quality Improvement. So the Q Community is associated with the Health Foundation and kind of a network of people who are interested in different aspects of quality improvement to do with health and social care. And our particular special interest group is looking at mindfulness, not just for health, but we know from studies that mindfulness has an impact on creativity, on compassion and empathy. And we're sort of interested in what that means for organizations and changing organizations. So today we have as a guest speaker, Karen Liebenguth, who is a very experienced mindfulness and meditation practitioner and teacher. So she works as a coach and as a mindfulness teacher, partly with the Breathworks program, but has also done work with teams and in organizations. And so today she'll be focusing on that part of her work to do with leadership teams and organizations, and talk a bit about like the applications of mindfulness beyond health. And I'm delighted to have you here today, Karen. Handing over to you. Oh, just one point on housekeeping, so to say. So everybody should hopefully be on, should ideally be on mute during the presentation. We think that the presentation should be like half an hour. So we've got some time for questions afterwards. If you've got a question, you're welcome to type it into the Zoom chat, and we'll kind of go through them at the end, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katja, for your generous and kind introduction. I'm really very pleased to be here and to be exploring how mindfulness can change our organizations. I'm going to talk for hopefully not longer than half an hour. And yeah, please do take some notes, and as well as looking at some of your questions, I'd also be happy to go back to some of what I'm sharing or saying. And if we have time, we can perhaps go a little bit deeper on some of what I'm saying. Yeah, so we can go back to some of the slides if you want to. So do take notes. That would be great. And of course, afterwards, if there's still some open thoughts or questions, you can always email me. Yeah, because we only have an hour. It's very short. Good. So I'm going to share my slides. Yeah, and can you all hear me? Please write a note if you can't hear me. All good? Yeah? So to start with, I just want to briefly share what I'm wanting to share with you in this webinar. So we're going to do a short practice in a very short moment. Then we briefly explore what mindfulness is, what it actually is. And then I want to share a theory of mindful leadership with you, a model of mindful leadership that is not my own, but it's a model that comes from Michael Chaskelson and Megan Wrights, and that I find very helpful. And within that model of mindful leadership, there are 3 core skills that I want to share with you. And then hopefully there's time to do another practice. And then we'll move into Q&A and a little bit of an exploration of the topic. Yeah? Great. So let's start with the practice, because of course mindfulness is most of all experiential. Yeah? So just let's take a moment wherever you are. Yeah? And I'm going to ring a bell. So let's just begin by becoming aware of the space we are in, maybe before you even close your eyes, but of course you can close your eyes, maybe just noticing where you are. Maybe resting your eyes on 3 things in your environment you are in right now and seeing what you are seeing. If you have already your eyes closed, you can get a felt sense of your environment. If you have your eyes open, just resting your gaze on 3 different things and really taking them in. So becoming aware of where you are. And then if it feels right, you can gently close your eyes or resting your gaze, softening your gaze. And then let's take 3 deep breaths. Maybe slightly extending the in and out breath. And noticing the movement of the breath, of each breath. And then noticing any sounds. So taking your awareness to the sounds around you. And letting the sounds come to you. So noticing sounds. Hearing what you're hearing. And then let's take our awareness into the soles of our feet. Noticing the contact with the floor and your feet. And noticing what that is like. Noticing the feet on the floor. What is that like? And bringing our awareness to our sitting bones on the chair. Noticing the contact there. And taking our awareness into our hands. Perhaps your hands are touching each other, maybe noticing what that is like. Or maybe just noticing your hands resting in your lap. And then let's take 3 deep breaths again. Knowing that you're breathing in and knowing that you're breathing out. And bringing a curious attitude, a curious interest to your experience in this moment. How your body is feeling. And how you are right now. What's your mood or emotional state? Just checking in with yourselves. And then coming back, bringing your awareness to the next slide. So let's explore what mindfulness is. There's a lot of talk about mindfulness. We read and hear about it. I always like to start sort of bringing ourselves together around what it actually is. So mindfulness in a nutshell is paying attention in the present moment and on purpose, to our body and breath, to our feelings and emotions, to our thoughts, to others, and to what's going on around us in a particular way, non-judgmentally. So I just want to explore that a little bit more, what it actually means, these three characteristics of what mindfulness is that you can see here on the slide in capital letters. So paying attention in the present moment means grounding our attention in the here and now, in the present moment, rather than getting lost in thoughts about the past or future. And then paying attention on purpose means that we learn how to intentionally direct and sustain our attention. So it's a little bit like shining a flashlight in a dark room. Without mindfulness, the light of our awareness would randomly drift from corner to corner. But with mindfulness, the light, we can direct the light on a particular spot, like the breath, like our thoughts, or particular thoughts or views that are going on in our mind, or on an emotion that we are in right now. That is meant by paying attention on purpose, because our attention is on something all the time. But purposeful paying attention is sustaining and directing our attention, which we can learn in mindfulness. And paying attention non-judgmentally means that we bring an attitude of kindness and compassion, friendliness and openness, to whatever is there in our experience in the present moment, rather than dismissing or judging our emotional state or mood that we are in. So, in summary, mindfulness, oh no, this is something that Michael West has said. Sorry, I'm one slide ahead. So Michael West, that many of you, I think, know very well, from his work around compassionate leadership, teamwork, and organizational change. He says that something that I really like: mindfulness in the workplace changes lives and cultures. Staff at all levels determine the culture of an organization and the level of change that happens or not. So let's look at how mindfulness can change our organizations. So here in this picture, we have two modes of mind. The mode of mind on the left is a full mind, a mind that is cluttered, with distractions and thoughts and ruminations or worries. And the mode of mind on the right-hand side is a mind that is awake and aware. And mindfulness practice can help us to move from the what we call ruminative narrative to experiential processing, on the right. And experiential processing happens when we can see what we see, hear what we hear, feel what we feel, in the present moment, in the here and now. And when that happens, when we are in the present moment, we can communicate, we can feel, we can act, we can think from our directly felt, embodied sensory awareness. And that allows us to listen with fascination. I also like to say to listen with delight, yeah, to others. And we can also understand ourselves and others better from that directly felt, embodied, present moment experience. And we can empathize better. Katja mentioned earlier empathy in her little introduction. And when we are in our direct experience, we can also truly serve and help others and our organization. So Michael West, in his talks and writings and lectures, he often mentions these core skills, yeah, when he talks about organizational change. So here's the slide that I thought was up earlier. This is again a little summary of what I've just said, what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is the practice of bringing awareness to our experience in the present moment, including our sensations, thoughts, impulses. And when we can bring awareness to what's going on to our experience, yeah, we can choose to respond rather than react to whatever comes our way, yeah, to whatever is happening. So mindfulness can help us to become response able. So I'm going to share now a theory of mindful leadership, or a model of mindful leadership with you. And when I talk about leadership here, I mean leadership as in senior managers, yeah, the people that lead our organizations, but also leadership as in everybody is a leader. Yeah, I really like this quote by May Watts. She says we are all leaders, even if it's not in our job title. Leadership is about listening, appreciation, and allowing others to grow. So in this sense, I'm talking here about leadership, but yeah, that includes, of course, senior leaders who lead organizations. So this model of mindful leadership has at its core three core skills that mindfulness practice can help us to develop and learn. Yeah, and I'm going to take us through these core skills. So the first core skill is allowing, and this links very much in with what I've just said about what mindfulness is. So allowing, the skill to allow our experience to be what it is. To allow what is the case to be the case, with an attitude of kindness and acceptance. And inquiry is another core skill, which is our capacity to explore our experience, yeah, moment by moment. And then the third core skill in this model is meta-awareness. And that's our ability to observe, yeah, to take a step back and to observe what's going on in our sensations and our thoughts and our impulses. Yeah. What's happening in our experience? So I'm going back to this model. So when we can allow our experience to be what it is, and we can be curious and explore our experience, and we can observe what's going on in our mind, the views or opinions or beliefs we hold in any given moment, that allows us to better emotionally self-regulate, yeah? That we can notice when we are, for example, annoyed or reactive or angry or overwhelmed. Yeah, and rather than taking it out on a colleague or making a knee-jerk reaction, yeah, we can take 3 breaths. We can notice what's going on for us. We can ground ourselves, we can clear the mind, and we can respond differently. Yeah, we are more response able. That is what I mean here by emotional, or what is meant here by emotional self-regulation. And the 3 core skills can help us better self-regulate. They also can help us empathize better with others and can help us take a broader perspective on things and also understand someone else's perspective better, yeah, or someone else's viewpoint, where they are coming from. And these 3 core skills can also help us to become more flexible, to adapt more easily to changing situations, yeah, because we are more response able. Yeah. And these skills also allow us to focus at one thing at a time, yeah, because in our very busy lives, where everything seems to happen very quickly and we feel we need to respond or react very quickly, we often do many things at the same time, which is actually not possible. And then these skills here in the green, in turn, can help us to collaborate more and better, help us build communities rather than silos. It can also help us be more resilient in times of adversity, in difficult times. And these skills and qualities can also help us to lead better in complex situations and contexts. Yeah? And we know that organizations are complex. Yeah? So this is, in a nutshell, a model of mindful leadership that gives us skills that we can learn through mindfulness practice, through becoming more aware. And when we have these skills, we are more able to respond, as I said, and make more creative and wiser choices about how we are with our colleagues, how we lead our teams, how we create cultures in workplaces that bring about sustainable and positive change. So I really like this quote by Viktor Frankl, which I think, I'm just going back a few slides, links very well to the inner circle of the mindful leadership model. That space that we can create to respond rather than react. So he says, Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. Yeah, very powerful quote, I think. So that's already all that I want to say. And before we go into questions or comments, discussion, or maybe a little bit more into some of what I've said, I'd like to do another practice, because a short practice that can help us learn the skill of allowing, of exploring our experience, of observing what's going on. The skills here in the inner circle. So let's do that. So it's called a 3 stages breathing space practice. I've got it here on the slide because I know some people like to see what they are practicing. If you're not interested, you will have this on your slides that are going to be sent to you. You can just relax, sit back, settle in, and I'll take you through it. So the first stage of this short mindfulness practice is about inquiring, exploring what's here in our experience. So noticing, observing what's happening in our physical body, maybe briefly scanning through your body from feet to head, and just noticing any pleasant or unpleasant sensations, aches or itches or softness perhaps. Also noticing any thoughts that are going on through your mind, maybe about presentation, what you've just heard, or maybe your thoughts, your mind is with something that happened this morning or this week, or maybe there are some thoughts about the future, some planning going on. And then also noticing what your emotional state is right now. How are you right now in this moment? And see whether you can bring a kind attitude to your experience. Allow your experience to be what it is right now, without needing to change it. And then moving on to the second stage of this practice, which is about focusing our attention on the breath. So inviting your awareness to your breath. Noticing the sensations of the breath, perhaps in your rib cage or a little further down in your belly. Noticing the rising and falling of each in and out breath. And if your mind has gone somewhere else, you can invite it back to the practice. And then moving into the third stage of this practice, which is about expanding our awareness to include our whole body. So getting a felt sense of your whole body sitting here, knowing that you're sitting here. And expanding your awareness a little more to include your environment, the space you are in. the chair you're sitting on, the sounds. Maybe there are other people nearby, maybe getting a sense of them, or even getting a sense here of the people in this webinar. And before we bring this to a close, noticing what's here now in your experience, how your body is feeling, how you are feeling as a whole. So when we are caught in the pressures and complexity of rapid change, linear solutions fall apart. The impulse is to move faster and work harder, but the reality is that we need to step back, think more deeply and broadly, and learn to see and act in new ways. So this stepping back and the thinking more deeply and broadly, and to learn to act and to learn to see and act in new ways, that is, I think, what mindfulness practice can offer us, yeah, and how it can help us change organizations. So let's see. Over to you, really. Thank you very much for listening and for practicing with me.
Thank you, Karen.
Mm.
That's been very relaxing, as some people agree on the chat, and really interesting to hear about, or like the kind of the way you talked us through the framework, and some really good quotes around like what it does. So yeah, so now is a space to ask questions, and because I think or like while people will probably think about questions they have, maybe I just ask the first one. So what I would be interested in is when you work with leadership teams, or like in an organizational team or leadership or group context, how is that different from the work you're doing with individuals around teaching mindfulness?
Good question. Shall I go straight in, or are there more? Do you want to say the questions and then will we have enough time for all of them? Shall we do one by one?
Maybe you answer this one, and meanwhile people can think about a couple of more questions, and then we can sort of go through that.
Yeah. So generally when I work in organizations, I usually suggest to the organization that when there are leaders who want to do mindfulness with me, that they form a group for themselves, and that their team members do a session or a program amongst themselves. Because what often happens with leaders, in my experience, is that they feel more comfortable, and also staff without their particular leaders feel more comfortable being amongst themselves. So when I work with leaders, what is different is that they feel more, in a way, safer to be a leadership team, because often in their day-to-day, leaders feel they are not really able to share what their experience is, as honestly as they sometimes need to do. And when they are amongst themselves as a leadership group, as leaders, it's a different space that's created for them to explore what their experience is. And usually I feel that the group can go deeper in their explorations, in their issues, in their struggles, in their suffering of whatever is going on. And the same applies to a group of staff. So often what I notice when I have a group of staff and there are two senior leaders in the group, often it inhibits people to share themselves fully, out of fear sometimes of perhaps disclosing too much, or that could reflect in a particular way on their job or on their promotion or development. So it's a very sensitive area that needs attention, I think.
That's really interesting, and it definitely makes a lot of sense. Oh yeah, and Matthew, I was just going to come on to that. What comes to mind is the concept of psychological safety, and that sort of it sounds like that's what you're trying to create in a peer group. Because you're working, I guess, within the constraints of an organization and the hierarchy and the sort of like power dynamics and all of that, what sort of present in an organization. And have you ever experienced in your work that the work you've done within an organization around mindfulness and teaching people mindfulness or mindful leadership, does it challenge the organization, or is it usually within the sort of like established hierarchy and power dynamics that are there?
No, it's both, really. I guess it always depends a little bit how open the organization as a whole is, and the people in it, if you like. Yeah, it already depends a little bit on the culture that's there when I come in and teach mindfulness practice with staff. So yeah, it can have all sorts of reactions. Usually, mindfulness practice is I always like to say it's non-fluffy. Yeah, it's a serious practice, and it's tough as well, and it's demanding, and it requires us to, if we really engage with it, it requires us to look at our experience as it is. And what we often find is when we practice becoming more aware and we pay attention to our body and feelings and thoughts, we do find unhelpful habits of thinking and behaving that are not so pretty, or that we discover and think, oh gosh, I didn't know that about myself. So it can be stirring. But of course it can, when it's held well and people feel safe, and we can bring curious and kindness to whatever is there. Yeah, that is part of creating psychological safety, that we create an environment of kindness and compassion and non-judgment, where we can do this level of self-exploration and sit and observe our habits, that we sometimes discover are not so helpful, and then also discover the impact our habits have on our staff, on how we work, how we relate to our colleagues, the decisions we make for the organization. some leaders discover quite a lot at times. And then the reactions to that depend a little bit where people are at and how willing they are to work with that. Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense. And I'm sure your skills as a coach come in very handy in those moments as well. So yeah, I just want to open up questions to to everyone. I'm sure I'm sure there are more questions. Does anyone want to come forward? Now's the time.
I'm so glad we have so much time left. My main worry was that I would talk too much and we would not have any time.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, Susan, hello.
Hi there. Hi. Excuse me. I was going to ask whether in the work that you do you make explicit, or how do you make explicit the need for the link between being mindful, being response able, and choosing to move in a particular direction that is in accordance with values? So you've talked about kindness, for example,
yeah,
compassion.
Yeah.
My understanding of mindfulness that it can be value-free. So I was just wondering whether in your work you make explicit those links so that we are encouraging mindful leadership to create a certain culture, and how do you go about that?
You know, I often don't talk about it so overtly, that is what mindfulness. Let's go one step back. I think mindfulness has no aim. Yeah, mindfulness is awareness. And when I work in organizations and with teams and particularly leaders, I don't overtly talk about that mindfulness changes cultures. I think it comes out of becoming more mindful, or becoming a mindful leader, becoming a mindful, and leader as in the broader sense of all staff being leaders. That when we begin to practice mindfulness, and kindness and compassion are an integral part of mindfulness practice, that when we change and we become more response able, we do make different choices, and those choices are often with the practice become kinder and more compassionate, coming out of the practice. Does that make sense?
Yes, to some extent, I think, in that you're saying that the way that you teach and coach and practice mindfulness, that there is an inherent quality within that is about kindness and compassion, and then the other goals or achievements may come out of that, but that's not the aim of being mindful. But the way that you're talking about mindful is it does embody kindness and compassion.
Yeah.
Yes.
It has practices that cultivate and help us learn to become kinder and more compassionate, and it explores. So within the mindfulness program, there are at least 2 sessions that focus on kindness and compassion.
Okay.
But when I run mindfulness programs, the attitude of kindness, curiosity, and compassion are present from day one. That attitude of non-judgment, to really be with our experience as it is, whether that is towards ourselves or others, is being practiced from the beginning within the mindfulness program.
Mm-hmm.
The paying attention non-judgmentally, that is what we practice together as a group, whether it's leaders or staff, from the beginning. And inquiry, this capacity of exploring our experience, as I shared with you, is an integral part of mindfulness training. So whenever I lead a practice in a program, there's always time afterwards, which we haven't done today, which I could have done a little bit. There's always a little bit of inquiry. So I helping participants explore, inquire into the experience, yeah, to become more aware of what's there. And that involves helping people to inquire with a non-judgmental attitude. Yeah, and when I hear judgment in the way that people explore their experience, and then I help them see that or become aware of that, perhaps critical or self-berating attitude. Yeah, and when we practice that, then that is becoming kinder. Yeah? That comes out of that. So it needs practice. It's not because we practice awareness, we become kind. So it's a particular way of practicing kindness. Yeah, a non-judgmental attitude. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting, the title of our webinar today, How Mindfulness Can Change Organizations. Organizations, that's just a concept, isn't it? That's people, isn't it? Organizations are made up of people. So when people become more mindful, yeah, that's what can change cultures. Michael West talks about mindful organizations. Yeah? What he really means is that the leaders and the people that make up the organization, you know, when they become more mindful, it cannot not change the culture and organization. Yeah, from the inside out. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. That's a very good point. And in a way was the starting point of our exploration with the special interest group, because I think some of us are mindfulness practitioners and had this feeling that inevitably when an individual practices mindfulness, it has an impact on the people around us, and particularly at work where we spend quite a lot of time with each other.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and I'm just wondering if there are any other questions.
Mm-hmm. Vishwapani, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I have a question, which is, you said just stimulated by you saying that organizations are people, but the organizations, I'm just wondering if in your work you consider some of the other issues that organizations bring collectively, like where power lies, where unconscious bias is affecting organizations, what the organization's values and aims are, the effect of things like targets, and how do you balance being in the present moment and having to achieve a target? So when you said that, all of those questions came into my mind. Just wondering, I mean, I know we've only got a couple of minutes now, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, that comes up all the time, yeah, when particularly with leaders, you know, are you saying, you know, and what do we do with our targets and getting on with things? And does it mean when we become more mindful, we can't, you know, we can't think anymore and we can't plan anymore and all of that? In my experience, and when I see a group of leaders over a longer period of time, is that they find that, and this is what I mean where the response able comes in, and when people begin to allow and inquire and have more meta-awareness, that they are able to slow down. Yeah, what Margaret Wheatley says here, leaders then become more able rather than making quick decisions or not allowing themselves to take time out, for example, yeah, or when they deal with, I don't know how many emails per day, when they do 10 million things at the same time. All of these things, what I see is that they have more confidence of slowing down, of stepping back and reflecting more. Yeah. I recently worked with a group of leaders, and it was so heartening and touching to see what some of them shared in terms of how they've started to make different choices around how they work and the business trips they make. So there was one guy, it was incredible what he had on his plate in terms of where he had to travel in 1 week. He had to go to 4 different places in 5 days, and he felt completely overwhelmed. And he felt also really that he had to be in 4 different places, and he couldn't, completely overwhelmed. And he shared how he was feeling with us. And he said afterwards that that was the first time that he actually shared so honestly the level of anxiety and overwhelm he was experiencing in his role and demands. And he said that although there were about 30 staff involved, he decided not to take a trip to Chile, where he would spend 24 hours to then go back. And he said he had never done it before. So this is less about what you've just asked about targets and values and all of that. But I think it just shows how when leaders particularly learn skills of mindfulness, how they can really make different decisions that serves them better and their people. And the following week, he shared with us how that impacted really on his week and the people he was working with. And he said that overall, he was a much better leader by having taken that decision, because he could pay more attention to the people here that he needed to pay attention to, and yeah, do more valuable work in that way than sitting on the plane yet again, to then not be present on the other side because of feeling so tired. So this is just a little insight, because the questions you're asking are big and important. And I think over time, when people and leaders learn to be more aware and can be more response able, they do slow down and step back and can listen more and work out what are our values, what are our targets, yeah, and bring other people in more. So I think that is the new ways of working that can happen when we are more response able, more aware. So that was probably not enough, I'm aware, but a little something.
Thank you. That's really, really, really helpful. Really, really good example. Yeah, I can really relate to that. I'm just conscious of time because it's almost 2:00 and we said we'd be finishing at 2:00. And a couple of people have already left, and I just want to take a moment to obviously thank you, Karen, for your presentation today and sharing your practice and your experience. It's been really interesting and really good conversation, I found. And also thank you to Matthew for all your support from the side of the Q community. And I also wanted to just point out, we've got another couple of webinars coming up. We haven't got the date set yet, but hopefully very soon. So maybe when we send out the link to the recording, we can share that with you. So hopefully there will be one in March with Mark Leonard around the social dimension of mindfulness. And hope then there will be one in April as a collaboration with the Complexity Special Interest Group, with Esther Hall and Rachel Lilly, around mindfulness, unconscious bias, and a better decision making. And Rachel Lilly will talk about her work in Wales. So that should be really, really interesting. And if you've got any ideas that for like somebody who should present or any topic we should explore, please do get in touch, and we're really happy for any suggestions. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And the slides will be sent around. I will send the presentation slides, and Matthew, will you send them around?
We will, yes, yeah, Matthew.
We'll send them, and the recording of this Zoom will go up on the Q's YouTube channel in a few days, or next something as well.
And by all means, if you have further question or want to have another chat, do contact me. I'm very happy to talk more.
Yes, and Karen's contact details are on the where you registered, on that Q website where we had the blurb about the webinar. You can find her contact details, and they're, I think, also on your slides.
They are. The last slides that are going to be sent to you will have a little bit more about my work and what I offer.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
So yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed the sessions, and have a good Friday afternoon and a good weekend when you get there.
Thank you. And you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go well. Thanks a lot.